The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like dying wasps, casting their sickly glow across Terminal B's cracked linoleum floor. Lieutenant Colonel Nix Thorne sat motionless in plastic chair 47C, her weathered flight jacket draped over civilian clothes that felt foreign after 2 decades in uniform. The departure board flickered. Denver DELAYED. Again. She'd been waiting 4 hours, watching businessmen pace and mothers wrangle screaming children, all of them oblivious to the woman who'd once guided bombers through hostile skis over Kandahar. Her phone buzzed with another text from her sister. "Can't wait to see you. The ranch is ready." Nick stared at the message, feeling the weight of her discharge papers in her jacket pocket. Medical retirement. The words still tasted bitter. One training accident, one blown eardrum, and suddenly she was unfit for flight status. 20 years of service reduced to a disability percentage and a pension. The airport CNN feed droned about rising tensions in the South China Sea. Stock footage of aircraft carriers and fighter jets filled the screens while talking heads debated military readiness. Nix almost laughed. They had no idea what readiness actually meant. It wasn't about billion-dollar jets or political posturing. It was about split-second decisions in the cockpit when surface-to-air missiles lit up your radar warning receiver like a Christmas tree. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" The announcement crackled through ancient speakers, different from the usual gate change notifications. Nix looked up to see a captain in dress blues standing near the information desk, his face grim. Multiple airline personnel flanked him, their expressions tense. "We're looking for any qualified military pilots currently in the terminal. Combat experience preferred. This is not a drill." His voice carried that particular authority that made even veteran officers straighten their spines. "Please report to Gate A7 immediately if you meet these qualifications." The terminal fell silent except for the hum of those dying fluorescent lights. Passengers exchanged confused glances, their comfortable civilian lives suddenly intersecting with something larger and more dangerous. A few people pulled out phones to record, but the captain's expression killed their enthusiasm quickly. Nix felt her pulse quicken for the first time in months. Her hands, steady from countless hours gripping control sticks through turbulence and combat maneuvers, remained perfectly still on her knees. But inside, something was awakening, the part of her that lived for the moment when routine became chaos, when training became survival. She stood slowly, her joints protesting after hours of inactivity. Around her, the terminal remained frozen in curious silence. No one else moved toward Gate A7. As she walked past the captain, he nodded once, a gesture of recognition between warriors who understood that some calls to service transcended discharge papers and medical classifications. The sky outside the terminal windows was darkening, heavy with storm clouds that seemed to mirror whatever crisis had brought a military officer into a civilian airport with such urgency. Lightning flickered in the distance, and Nix couldn't shake the feeling that her quiet retirement was about to become something else entirely. Captain Morrison checked his watch. 1,347 hours. The Pentagon's secure line had been buzzing for 20 minutes with updates from Pacific Command, each more urgent than the last. Chinese naval forces had moved beyond their usual territorial claims, establishing what they called security perimeters around international shipping lanes. 3 cargo vessels had already been turned away from their planned routes. Their GPS signals jammed the moment they entered disputed waters. The situation required immediate response, but the nearest carrier group was 72 hours out. What they needed was something faster, something that could establish air superiority before the situation escalated beyond diplomatic solutions. The problem was finding pilots qualified to fly the experimental aircraft waiting in the classified hangar beneath Denver International Airport. Morrison studied the woman approaching Gate A7. She moved with the measured gait of someone accustomed to walking on flight decks in heavy seas, her shoulders squared despite wearing civilian clothes. Her eyes swept the area with the systematic scanning pattern drilled into combat pilots. Threat assessment had become muscle memory. Lieutenant Colonel Thorne. He'd pulled her file during the 15-minute window between the Pentagon's call and his terminal announcement. The record was impressive. 2,847 flight hours, including 847 in combat zones. 3 distinguished flying crosses, 2 Bronze Stars, and a reputation among ground forces as the pilot you wanted providing close air support when everything went to hell. That's correct, Captain. Her voice carried the slightly hoarse quality common among military aviators, years of shouting over engine noise and radio static. Though I should mention I'm medically retired as of last week. Morrison had seen that in her file too. The training accident that damaged her inner ear, the medical review board's decision, the forced retirement despite her protest that the injury was minor. Military bureaucracy at its most frustrating, sidelining a combat veteran over a technicality while less experienced pilots filled operational roles. Ma'am, with respect, we need someone who can fly in conditions that would ground most of our current pilots. The mission parameters require someone with your specific skill set. He gestured toward the jetway, where 2 Air Force security personnel waited discreetly. If you'll come with me, I can brief you on the situation. Nix glanced back at the departure board. Her flight to Denver was still delayed, but now the reason seemed less important than the opportunity presenting itself. Her sister would understand. She always had during 20 years of canceled holidays and delayed homecomings. What kind of aircraft are we discussing, Captain? The question emerged from professional habit. In her experience, urgent military requests usually involved either prototype technology or aircraft, so damaged that only desperate circumstances would put them back in the air. The kind that doesn't officially exist, ma'am. The kind that might be our only option for preventing a shooting war in the Pacific. Morrison's expression revealed nothing, but his tone carried the weight of classified briefings and national security implications that extended far beyond airport terminals and delayed flights. Through the jetway windows, storm clouds continued building on the horizon, their darkness promising more than just weather delays. The secure elevator descended 20 stories beneath Denver International Airport, passing levels that existed on no public blueprint. Nix watched the floor indicators count down into negative numbers, each level representing deeper classification levels that required higher security clearances. The elevator's silence was broken only by the whisper of filtered air and the subtle vibration of massive ventilation systems maintaining atmospheric pressure in the underground facility. Captain Morrison stood beside her, his uniform crisp despite the chaos of the past hour. The 2 Air Force security personnel flanked them, their weapons visible but not threatening, a reminder that this was no longer civilian territory. Their faces revealed nothing about the mission ahead, but Nix caught the tension in their posture. Whatever waited below demanded their absolute attention. Level -18, Morrison announced as the elevator shuddered to a halt. Welcome to Cheyenne Mountain's little sister. The doors opened onto a corridor that belonged in a science fiction movie. LED strips provided clean white illumination along walls lined with blast-resistant doors marked only with alphanumeric codes. The air smelled of ozone and hydraulic fluid, familiar scents that told Nix they were approaching something mechanical, something designed to fly. Their footsteps echoed despite sound-dampening materials that should have absorbed most noise. Side corridors branched off at regular intervals, each guarded by additional security checkpoints and retinal scanners. Nix estimated the facility's size at several city blocks, all hidden beneath Colorado's prairie like a massive technological iceberg. How long has this place existed? She asked, nodding the mixture of cutting-edge technology and institutional architecture that suggested decades of construction and modification. Officially, it doesn't, Morrison's smile held no humor. Unofficially, construction began during the Cold War as a backup command facility. Over the years, it evolved into something more specialized: research and development for projects that require absolute security. They passed a blast door marked with biohazard warnings and electromagnetic shielding specifications that made Nix's pilot instincts sharpen. Whatever they'd built down here wasn't just hidden. It was dangerous enough to require isolation from the outside world. And the aircraft. She'd learned to ask direct questions when military officers started speaking in euphemisms. 20 years of service had taught her that specialized projects usually meant either experimental weapons or equipment so advanced that acknowledging its existence could shift global power balances. Morrison stopped before a door marked only with the number 7 and a symbol she didn't recognize, wings surrounding what looked like a lightning bolt. "Ma'am, what I'm about to show you is classified at levels that require presidential authorization to discuss." The aircraft waiting beyond this door represents 15 years of development and approximately $40 billion in Black Project funding. He placed his palm on a scanner, then leaned forward for retinal verification. Its official designation is X-47 Phoenix. Its unofficial designation is what we call it when we're trying to prevent World War III. The massive door began sliding open with the deep mechanical rumble of hydraulics designed to move objects weighing several tons. Beyond lay darkness penetrated by running lights that outlined something vast and angular. Nix felt her pulse quicken as her eyes adjusted to reveal the silhouette of an aircraft, unlike anything in her 20 years of flying experience. The hangar stretched beyond visual range, its ceiling disappearing into shadows broken only by maintenance gantries and overhead cranes capable of lifting entire aircraft. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across concrete floors marked with blast patterns, evidence of engine tests conducted in absolute secrecy. The air hummed with electrical current from systems that remained powered even in standby mode. But Nix's attention focused entirely on the aircraft occupying the hangar's center. The X-47 Phoenix defied conventional aviation design. Its hull exhibited the angular geometry of stealth technology, but with curves that seemed almost organic, as if someone had crossbred a B-2 bomber with something that had never touched Earth's atmosphere. The aircraft measured approximately 90 feet in length, its wingspan reaching nearly 100 feet of swept-wing design that incorporated materials she couldn't identify even after 2 decades around military hardware. "Jesus Christ," she whispered, the words escaping before professional composure could contain them. "That's a common first reaction," Morrison said, leading her around the aircraft's perimeter. "The Phoenix represents a quantum leap in aviation technology. Its engines operate on principles that most physics textbooks say are impossible. Its flight characteristics exceed anything currently operational by several orders of magnitude." Nix studied the engine intakes, noting the absence of traditional turbofan architecture. Instead, she observed crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with internal light, connected to conduits that ran along the aircraft's frame like a circulatory system. "What does it burn for fuel?" "That's classified beyond your current clearance level." Morrison's tone suggested she might not want to know the answer. "What I can tell you is that it's capable of sustained flight at altitudes approaching the mesosphere, with speeds that would make Mach 5 seem pedestrian." They climbed a mobile platform that positioned them beside the cockpit. The canopy was unlike anything in Nix's experience, not glass or transparent aluminum, but something that seemed to bend light around its edges. Through its surface, she could see an interior that looked more like a space capsule than a traditional aircraft cockpit. "Ma'am, I need to ask you directly," Morrison said, his voice carrying the weight of classified knowledge and urgent necessity. "Given what you've seen, given what the situation in the Pacific requires, would you be willing to fly this aircraft on a mission that could prevent a war?" Nick stared into the cockpit, seeing displays that operated on principles beyond her understanding, surrounded by an aircraft that represented humanity's technological edge. Her medical retirement suddenly seemed like a paper barrier against something much larger than military bureaucracy. "Captain," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was considering, "I think you'd better brief me on exactly what's happening in the Pacific." Outside the hangar's sealed environment, storm clouds continued gathering strength, as if the weather itself sensed that history was about to pivot on decisions made in underground facilities that officially didn't exist. The briefing room's walls displayed real-time satellite imagery of the South China Sea, where Chinese naval formations had arranged themselves in positions that violated every maritime treaty signed since World War II. Red icons marked destroyer groups, submarine signatures, and aircraft carrier battle groups moving with the coordination of a military operation planned months in advance. Blue icons representing Allied forces appeared scattered and outnumbered, their positions revealing the strategic disadvantage facing American interests in the region. Admiral Patricia Vance appeared on the secure video link from Pacific Command, her image transmitted through quantum-encrypted channels that made her presence feel immediate despite the 1,000 miles separating Hawaii from Colorado. Her face carried the exhaustion of someone managing a crisis that could explode into global conflict within hours. "Colonel Thorne, the situation is deteriorating faster than our diplomatic channels can manage." The Admiral's voice cut through static that suggested electronic warfare was already affecting communications in the region. At 900 Zulu time, Chinese forces began enforcing what they call navigation restrictions in international waters. 3 cargo vessels have been boarded, their crews detained for what Beijing claims are security inspections. Nick studied the tactical display, noting the positioning of Chinese assets. Their formation suggested preparation for area denial operations, classic strategy for controlling sea lanes through overwhelming local force presence. "Admiral, what's our current force projection capability in the region?" "The Reagan Carrier Group is 72 hours out, minimum. Our submarine assets are in position, but can't surface without triggering the shooting war we're trying to avoid." Vance highlighted several areas on the map where American submarines maintained covert positions. "What we need is rapid air superiority establishment before Chinese fighters can engage our reconnaissance assets." Captain Morrison activated another display showing the Phoenix's projected flight path. The route bypassed traditional approach vectors, instead climbing to altitudes where conventional aircraft couldn't operate. "Ma'am, the Phoenix can reach the South China Sea in 4 hours at operational altitude. Its stealth characteristics make it invisible to current-generation radar systems, and its electronic warfare capabilities could neutralize Chinese air defenses before they realize they're under attack." Electronic warfare. Nick studied the technical specifications scrolling across multiple monitors. The Phoenix's systems included components she didn't recognize, weapons designations that weren't in any manual she'd memorized during 2 decades of military service. "The Phoenix can disrupt enemy communications, navigation, and weapons systems across a radius measured in hundreds of miles," Morrison explained. "Think of it as an electronic warfare platform capable of creating a communications dead zone large enough to encompass entire naval battle groups." Admiral Vance leaned forward, her expression grave. "Colonel, what we're asking you to do is fly into the most heavily defended airspace on the planet and essentially blind the Chinese military long enough for diplomatic solutions to take effect. The mission parameters require someone with extensive combat experience and the ability to operate independently when communications are compromised." Nix absorbed the briefing materials, nodding casualty estimates and mission success probabilities that painted a sobering picture. The Phoenix represented humanity's technological edge, but even advanced aircraft couldn't eliminate the human element of warfare: pilot skill, decision-making under pressure, and the ability to adapt when carefully planned operations encountered unexpected resistance. "What's the backup plan if the Phoenix is detected or damaged?" she asked. The room fell silent. Morrison and Admiral Vance exchanged glances that suggested backup plans were luxuries they couldn't afford given current circumstances. "Ma'am," Admiral Vance finally said, "you would be the backup plan." The Phoenix's cockpit enveloped Nix like something designed by alien intelligence for human operation. Every surface curved organically around her seated position, with displays that materialized from seemingly solid panels when her hands approached control interfaces. The pilot's seat adjusted automatically to her body dimensions, connecting her to systems that monitored everything from heart rate to brain wave patterns. "The neural interface requires approximately 30 minutes for full synchronization," explained Dr. Alina Vasquez, the project's chief engineer. Her accent carried traces of MIT and Caltech, with the particular intensity of someone who'd spent years developing technology that existed at the boundary between science and science fiction. "During this period, the aircraft systems will map your neurological patterns and establish communication protocols between your conscious decision-making processes and the Phoenix's flight systems." Nix felt subtle vibrations as the aircraft systems came online around her. The cockpit displays shifted from startup diagnostics to operational parameters, revealing information density that would overwhelm most pilots. Instead of traditional instrument clusters, holographic projections provided three-dimensional representations of airspace, threat assessments, and system status reports. "Ma'am, the Phoenix operates on principles that extend beyond conventional flight dynamics," Dr. Vasquez continued, her voice carrying through the cockpit's communication system. "At operational altitude, you'll be flying in atmospheric conditions where traditional aerodynamics become secondary to electromagnetic field manipulation." The control system felt familiar despite its advanced technology. Stick and rudder responses translated through computer systems that interpreted her intentions and implemented them through means she didn't need to understand. The Phoenix responded to pilot input like a traditional aircraft, while utilizing propulsion and control systems that operated according to physics principles that remained classified. "How does it handle in combat situations?" Nix asked, running through pre-flight checks that resembled a hybrid between aircraft inspection and space vehicle preparation. The Phoenix's defensive capabilities include electronic warfare systems that can neutralize incoming missiles before they achieve target lock, and evasive maneuvering performance that exceeds anything currently operational. Dr. Vasquez activated additional displays showing weapons systems integrated into the aircraft structure. "For offensive operations, you have access to directed energy weapons and electronic warfare capabilities that can disable enemy systems without creating the debris fields associated with kinetic weapons." Through the hangar's massive doors, support crews were preparing for a departure that would remain unrecorded in any official flight log. The Phoenix's mission would exist only in classified after-action reports and the memories of personnel with security clearances that required presidential authorization to discuss. "Dr. Vasquez, what's the aircraft's operational ceiling?" Nix asked, nodding altimeter readings that extended beyond the stratosphere. "Officially, the Phoenix is rated for flight operations up to 100,000 feet. Unofficially, we've had it as high as 120,000 feet during testing phases." The engineer's smile suggested there were capabilities she wasn't authorized to discuss. "At operational altitude, you'll be flying above most surface-to-air missile engagement envelopes and conventional fighter aircraft operational limits." The neural interface reached full synchronization with a sensation like tuning a radio until static resolved into clear signal. Suddenly, Nix could feel the Phoenix's systems as extensions of her own nervous system. Engine performance registered as physical sensation, radar contacts appeared as intuitive awareness rather than display information. "Holy shit," she whispered, experiencing flight preparation unlike anything in 20 years of military aviation. The hangar's blast doors began opening with mechanical thunder that announced the Phoenix's emergence into a world that wasn't ready for technology that redefined the boundaries of human flight capability. Denver International Airport's restricted airspace cleared with the efficiency of operations planned at levels where national security superseded civilian air traffic concerns. Control tower communications had been rerouted through military channels, with cover stories involving classified training exercises that would explain any unusual radar contacts reported by civilian observers. The Phoenix emerged from underground concealment like something surfacing from technological depths, its hull reflecting runway lights in patterns that suggested materials engineered at the molecular level. Ground crews maintained perimeter security around the aircraft, while final systems checks confirmed operational readiness for a mission that would either prevent a war or trigger global conflict. "Phoenix 1, this is Crystal Palace Control," came the voice through Nix's headset, the call sign indicating communication through the most secure military channels available. "You are cleared for immediate departure on Vector 090, altitude unrestricted, destination classified. Weather conditions favorable, winds calm." Nix felt the Phoenix's engines responding to her touch with power that transcended anything in her experience. Instead of the familiar rumble of turbofan engines, she sensed energy flowing through systems that operated according to principles that remained beyond her understanding, but responded to her pilot training with intuitive precision. "Crystal Palace, Phoenix 1 ready for departure." Her voice carried through communication systems that would maintain contact even at altitudes where conventional radio signals couldn't propagate. "Systems green, mission profile loaded, estimated time to operational area 4 hours 30 minutes. The aircraft lifted from the runway with acceleration that pressed her into the pilot's seat, despite inertial compensation systems designed to minimize G-force effects. Through the cockpit's panoramic displays, she watched Denver's lights falling away beneath her as the Phoenix climbed through altitude bands where commercial aircraft never operated. At 30,000 feet, the Phoenix's true capabilities began manifesting. Its speed increased beyond anything achievable by conventional aircraft, while maintaining flight characteristics that felt natural despite violating multiple laws of physics she'd learned during pilot training. The aircraft's stealth systems activated automatically, rendering it invisible to ground-based radar installations that tracked conventional air traffic. "Phoenix 1, be advised you are entering restricted airspace under emergency authorization," Crystal Palace Control transmitted. "Maintain current heading, climb to operational altitude at pilot discretion. Mission parameters remain classified until arrival at designated coordinates." At 60,000 feet, Nix entered atmospheric conditions where few humans had operated aircraft. The sky outside her cockpit turned deep purple-black, with stars visible even in daylight conditions. Earth curved beneath her in a way that reminded her of astronaut photographs, but she was flying an aircraft rather than orbiting the planet. The Pacific Ocean appeared on her navigation displays as a vast blue expanse marked with red icons representing Chinese naval forces and the growing crisis that had pulled her from civilian retirement into operations that would determine whether diplomatic solutions could prevent military conflict. "Phoenix 1, you are approaching the point of no return," Crystal Palace Control advised. "Chinese military communications are reporting increased electronic warfare activity in your operational area. Recommend extreme caution during final approach phase." Nix checked her weapons systems and electronic warfare capabilities, knowing that the next few hours would test not only the Phoenix's advanced technology, but her ability to operate independently in hostile airspace where backup was impossible, and failure meant more than personal casualties. Below her, the Pacific stretched endlessly toward a confrontation that could reshape global politics. At 80,000 feet above the Pacific, Nix entered a realm where traditional aviation merged with something approaching space flight. The Phoenix maintained steady acceleration, despite atmospheric conditions that would disable conventional aircraft, its systems adapting to air density variations that changed dramatically with altitude. Through the cockpit's advanced displays, she monitored Chinese naval formations spread across hundreds of square miles of disputed waters. Phoenix 1, this is Overwatch Control, came a new voice through her communications system, the call sign indicating she'd transitioned from Crystal Palace to Forward Operational Command. We have updated intelligence on target disposition. Chinese battle groups have increased their defensive posture, with surface-to-air missile systems at maximum readiness levels. The tactical display populated with threat assessments that painted a sobering picture of the airspace ahead. Chinese naval forces had established overlapping air defense zones that created multiple layers of surface-to-air missile coverage, supported by fighter aircraft on combat air patrol at maximum engagement altitude. Penetrating this defensive network would require the Phoenix's stealth capabilities and Nix's combat experience working in perfect coordination. Overwatch, Phoenix 1 acknowledging updated threat assessment. Beginning electronic warfare preparation phase. Nix activated systems that existed beyond her technical understanding, but responded to her training with familiar reliability. The aircraft's electronic warfare suite began analyzing Chinese military communications, mapping their command and control networks with precision that revealed the structure of their entire operation. At 90,000 feet, the Phoenix crossed into Chinese-claimed airspace without triggering any defensive responses. Its stealth characteristics rendered it invisible to radar systems designed to detect conventional aircraft, while its altitude exceeded the engagement envelope of most surface-to-air missile systems. However, Nix knew that advantage would disappear the moment she began active electronic warfare operations. Overwatch, Phoenix 1 beginning mission profile in 3 minutes. She studied the tactical situation, noting Chinese fighter patrol patterns and naval formation movements that suggested preparation for expanded operations beyond their current territorial claims. Electronic warfare initiation will probably trigger their air defense systems even if they can't target me directly. Phoenix 1, be advised that diplomatic channels report Chinese leadership is considering military action against Allied shipping within the next 6 hours. Your mission timeline just became critical to preventing wider conflict. The weight of responsibility settled over Nix like familiar equipment from 2 decades of combat operations. She'd flown close air support missions where ground forces depended on her precision. But this mission carried implications that extended beyond battlefield casualties to global consequences that could affect millions of people who would never know her name or understand what happened in airspace above the South China Sea. The Phoenix's electronic warfare systems reached full operational capacity, with displays showing Chinese military communications networks mapped in real time. Their command structure appeared vulnerable to disruption that could blind their operations for hours, but activating those systems would announce the presence of capabilities they weren't supposed to exist. Phoenix 1, you are authorized to initiate electronic warfare operations at pilot discretion. Rules of engagement. Neutralize Chinese military communications and navigation systems, but avoid casualties whenever possible. This is still a diplomatic situation. Nix's finger hovered over the activation control, knowing that touching it would cross a line between covert operations and active warfare that could escalate beyond anyone's ability to control. The first wave of electronic warfare effects rippled across Chinese naval communications, with the precision of a surgical strike designed to blind rather than destroy. Nix watched her displays populate with real-time intelligence, as the Phoenix's systems infiltrated Chinese military networks, mapping their command structure while systematically disrupting their ability to coordinate operations across multiple battle groups. Overwatch, Phoenix One has initiated electronic warfare operations. Chinese communications are experiencing significant degradation across all tactical frequencies. Her voice remained steady despite the magnitude of what she just accomplished, essentially blinding a modern military force without firing a single kinetic weapon. Their surface-to-air missile systems are losing target acquisition capability. The tactical display showed immediate results as Chinese naval formations began showing signs of confusion. Ship movements that had followed precise coordination patterns suddenly became erratic as command and control systems struggled with communication breakdowns that extended across their entire operational area. Phoenix One were monitoring Chinese military frequencies. They're reporting widespread equipment malfunctions and communication failures. Their fighter patrols are requesting instructions, but receiving no response from Fleet Command. Overwatch Control's voice carried the satisfaction of watching a carefully planned operation achieve its objectives. Estimated time before they restore communications. Nix monitored the Phoenix's electronic warfare effectiveness through displays that showed Chinese military networks like a three-dimensional map, with failing connections highlighted in red. Based on current degradation patterns, they'll need approximately 4 to 6 hours to restore basic communications. Full operational capability will require extensive system diagnostics and potential hardware replacement. The implications became clear as Chinese naval forces began withdrawing from their most aggressive positions, their commanders apparently unwilling to maintain advanced deployments without reliable communication with higher command authorities. Ships that had been enforcing navigation restrictions started moving toward safer positions, while their crews attempted to diagnose equipment failures that existed only in the electronic realm. Phoenix One, diplomatic channels report Chinese military leadership is requesting emergency communications with their counterparts in Washington. They're apparently experiencing what they describe as unprecedented technical difficulties, affecting their entire South China Sea operation. The satisfaction in Overwatch Control's voice suggested the mission was achieving its objectives beyond original expectations. But Nix's combat experience warned her against premature celebration. Military forces didn't surrender strategic advantages because of equipment malfunctions without attempting countermeasures. Chinese military doctrine emphasized redundancy and resilience precisely to prevent single point-of-failure scenarios like the one she'd created. Overwatch, I'm detecting attempts to restore communications through hardened backup systems. Their electronic warfare specialists are beginning to identify the source of their problems. Warning indicators appeared on her tactical display as Chinese forces adapted to their new reality with typical military efficiency. They may not be able to target me directly, but they're starting to implement workaround procedures. The game of technological cat and mouse was entering its second phase, with Chinese forces attempting to restore operational capability, while Nix maintained electronic superiority through systems they couldn't detect or target. The Phoenix's advantages remained decisive, but military history taught that technological superiority was temporary unless supported by strategic objectives that extended beyond individual engagements. Phoenix One maintained current operations until Chinese forces demonstrate clear withdrawal from disputed territories. Diplomatic channels are reporting progress, but we need Chinese naval forces to actually move before we can declare mission success. The South China Sea stretched beneath her like a vast blue game board, where pieces were moving in response to her electronic interference, but the final outcome remained uncertain. Chinese countermeasures began manifesting with the systematic approach of military engineers trained to operate under electronic warfare conditions. Nix watched her tactical displays as enemy forces implemented procedures designed to restore communications through methods that bypassed conventional military networks. Their adaptation timeline exceeded her original estimates, testament to preparation that anticipated exactly this type of sophisticated electronic attack. Overwatch. Phoenix 1 reporting Chinese military units are achieving partial communication restoration through commercial satellite networks and hardened landline connections. The tactical situation grew more complex as enemy forces demonstrated resilience that transformed her decisive electronic advantage into a temporary operational delay. They're beginning to coordinate movements despite continued electronic warfare effects. Fighter aircraft appeared on her long-range sensors as Chinese air defense forces launched patrol missions designed to locate and engage whatever had caused their electronic warfare crisis. Their search patterns revealed sophisticated understanding of stealth aircraft capabilities and the altitude bands where advanced reconnaissance platforms typically operated. Phoenix 1 were detecting increased Chinese fighter activity at multiple altitude levels. Their search patterns suggest they're specifically hunting for stealth aircraft in your operational area. Overwatch Control's concern leaked through professional composure as the mission entered uncharted territory. Recommend maintaining maximum altitude and electronic warfare effectiveness until Chinese forces demonstrate clear withdrawal from disputed positions. The Phoenix's stealth systems continued providing protection from detection, but Nix recognized the tactical reality that stealth technology was probability mathematics rather than absolute invisibility. Each minute in hostile airspace increased the chances of detection through electronic emission patterns, thermal signatures, or simple visual observation by pilots trained to recognize anomalous atmospheric conditions. Overwatch. Chinese naval forces are beginning organized withdrawal from their most advanced positions. Their flagship units are maintaining communication through backup systems, but smaller vessels appear to be operating independently. She monitored the changing tactical picture as enemy forces adapted to conditions they didn't fully understand, but recognized as dangerous to their operational security. 3 Chinese destroyers had already crossed out of disputed waters into areas where their presence couldn't be challenged under international maritime law. Their withdrawal represented partial mission success, but larger naval formations continued maintaining positions that threatened Allied shipping lanes and regional stability. Phoenix 1. Diplomatic channels report Chinese leadership is requesting emergency consultation with Washington regarding what they describe as sophisticated electronic attack capabilities possessed by unknown parties. They appear willing to negotiate territorial disputes in exchange for cessation of electronic warfare operations. The irony wasn't lost on Nix. Her mission to prevent warfare was succeeding precisely because she demonstrated capabilities so advanced that potential enemies preferred negotiation to conflict. The Phoenix represented technological deterrence in its purest form, the ability to neutralize enemy military advantages without creating casualties that would demand retaliation. Overwatch. Recommend beginning graduated reduction of electronic warfare effects to allow Chinese forces to maintain face during withdrawal operations. Complete communication restoration should be synchronized with their naval forces reaching non-disputed waters. 4 hours above the South China Sea, she was conducting diplomacy through electronic warfare, using technology that officially didn't exist to prevent a war that would affect millions of people who would never know her name. The mission's successful resolution allowed space for considerations beyond immediate tactical requirements. The gradual restoration of Chinese military communications coincided with their naval forces reaching positions that respected international maritime boundaries and traditional shipping lanes. Nix monitored the withdrawal through electronic intelligence that revealed enemy frustration at equipment, failures they couldn't fully explain, but their disciplined retreat demonstrated professional military leadership, prioritizing strategic objectives over technological curiosity. Phoenix 1. Chinese naval forces have achieved full withdrawal from disputed positions. Their communications are requesting immediate diplomatic contact with Washington to discuss what they term mutual electronic warfare limitations in the South China Sea region. Overwatch Control's voice carried relief that suggested mission success beyond original parameters. You are authorized to terminate electronic warfare operations and begin return to base. Nix initiated shutdown procedures for systems that had blindly guided modern naval forces for 6 hours, watching her tactical displays as Chinese military networks returned to full operational capacity. The enemy's rapid communication restoration revealed backup systems and procedures that would make future electronic warfare operations significantly more challenging. But the immediate crisis had been resolved through technological demonstration rather than kinetic conflict. Overwatch, Phoenix 1 terminating electronic warfare operations. Chinese military communications returning to normal operational parameters. The weight of successful mission completion settled over her differently than combat operations that produced immediate visible results. Beginning return flight profile, estimated arrival Denver in 4 hours. The Phoenix's climb to maximum operational altitude provided perspective on what she'd accomplished through 6 hours of invisible warfare above international waters. Chinese naval formations appeared as tiny specks against the ocean's blue expanse, their strategic withdrawal representing victory, achieved through capabilities they couldn't target or counter with conventional military responses. Phoenix 1. Preliminary diplomatic reports indicate Chinese leadership is characterizing today's events as technical difficulties, rather than acknowledging foreign electronic warfare operations. They appear willing to respect territorial boundaries in exchange for assurance that electronic warfare capabilities won't be employed against their forces in international waters. At 100,000 feet above the Pacific, Nix considered the implications of success that would remain classified for decades. The Phoenix's capabilities had prevented a war, but that victory existed only in after-action reports and the memories of personnel with security clearances that required presidential authorization to discuss. History would record diplomatic resolution of South China Sea tensions, without acknowledging the technological demonstration that made negotiation preferable to military confrontation. The aircraft's flight path carried her away from hostile airspace toward American territory, and whatever future awaited someone who'd proven that medical retirement was insufficient barrier against national security requirements. Her inner ear damage seemed trivial compared to capabilities she demonstrated during 6 hours of electronic warfare above disputed waters. Phoenix 1. Be advised that your mission performance has generated interest at the highest levels of military and civilian leadership. Recommend preparation for extensive debriefing and possible reassignment to classified projects requiring your specific skill set. The storms over Denver had cleared during her 8-hour mission, revealing city lights spread across the Colorado Prairie like a technological constellation. But Nix understood that her retirement from conventional military service had ended somewhere above the South China Sea, replaced by responsibilities that existed at the intersection of advanced technology and national security requirements. Below her, America slept peacefully, unaware that war had been prevented by an aircraft that officially didn't exist, and a pilot who'd supposedly been medically retired from active duty. The Phoenix's descent through Denver's airspace occurred under the same security protocols that had concealed its departure: military traffic control, cleared flight paths, and cover stories involving classified training operations that explained unusual radar signatures to civilian observers. The aircraft's stealth capabilities rendered it invisible to most detection systems, but Denver International Airport's underground facility required precision navigation through approach vectors that avoided commercial air traffic. Phoenix 1, Denver Control, you are cleared for approach to runway 07 classified, wind calm, visibility unlimited. Ground crews standing by for immediate post-flight security procedures. The voice belonged to controllers with clearances that permitted discussion of aircraft that existed beyond normal military inventories. Estimated ground time for debriefing and maintenance evaluation 8 hours. The landing felt familiar despite the Phoenix's advanced technology, touchdown, rollout, and taxi procedures that connected advanced aerospace engineering with basic pilot skills that remained constant regardless of propulsion systems or flight performance capabilities. Ground crews emerged from concealment with equipment designed to service aircraft that operated according to principles beyond conventional aviation maintenance. Dr. Vasquez waited at the debriefing facility with technical staff responsible for analyzing mission performance and aircraft system status. Her expression combined relief at successful mission completion with scientific curiosity about data.